When I was 14, I went to a summer camp for boys. The summer camp was based in the very south of England, near Cornwall, and it was specifically for teenage boys between 12 and 17. That was over 20 years ago, and I am now writing this from my home study, where I spend my hours working as an architect. The summer camp was, as you can imagine, very lively and boisterous. In total, I think there must have been around 800 youths attending, and we were all allocated into cabins based on our age range. It was amazing, and a lot of fun, and very good for socializing, especially for a withdrawn teenager like myself. I made some lifelong friends at that camp, and I would go back in a heartbeat. But there was one disturbing incident that happened during the summer, an experience that still haunts me and unsettles me to this day. I believe that I encountered an unknown creature, possibly some type of cryptid. I'm not too familiar on the whole topic of cryptozoology, so maybe you could shed some light for me. I know it sounds crazy, and believe me, writing this makes me feel nervous, as I feel I could be referred to by some kind of mental health intervention. I have always felt I've been pretty sound at mine, and I've never had any problems with hallucinations. But what I saw during the summer of 1999 was something that I'll never forget. I understand that sounds very cliche, but it's the truth. I was in a cabin with 3 other kids, and we spent the evening playing strip poker. The idea was that the loser would end up naked and would have to jump into the lake, close to the camp. None of the camp leaders knew we were playing, and we used an old torch to create some light. But anytime we heard footsteps, we all raced back to bed and pretended to be asleep. On this occasion, I was losing, and losing hard. I was already down to my boxers and socks, and the other guy still had on his pajamas. A few more losses, and I would be naked, and the entire laughing stock of the camp. I was dreading jumping into the lake, which would be no doubt absolutely freezing and Baltic. I also wondered what kind of creatures were even in the lake, and I imagined leeches and crabs and all sorts of other slimy things. I shuddered, both from the thought and the draft coming into the window. The final round was dealt, and I only had 2 5s and no aces. I lost and took off all my last garments before walking to the lake. Some of the other cabins were watching from their windows, but I didn't think that they would pass much attention. I walked off the pier a little and braced myself for the ensuing icy immersion that I was about to undertake. As I stood there with smirks from the other cabin mates, I noticed something in the water, something moving, creating little tiny waves and ripples. I assumed it must have been a slight wind. I turned around and gave the boys a little wave before jumping in. As I came up, I was struggling for breath as the water was freezing and seemed to engulf my entire chest. Every inch of me was freezing and screaming in agony. I opened up my eyes, and I also noticed that the other guys had taken my clothes and ran back to the cabin, laughing. I cursed them as I tried to swim back to the edge and pull myself back up. As I tried to pull myself out, I felt something grab my foot from behind. My head jolted in fear as I turned back and was horrified at what I was seeing. A large creature, which looked crocodilian, but with a human reptile face, had its arms outstretched, grabbing me, pulling me into the water. The face was distorted, with scales, and slimy and flaky. I was not only repulsed, but horrified. Its eyes were two without any iris, and a complete icy blue, which reflected off the dark water. They were almost illuminating a light, and piercing, and were steadily fixed on my face. The creature made no noise, but continued to pull me in with its arms. I started crying and screaming, hoping that some of the other boys would still be watching. I began to wonder if this was some kind of sick joke by the other guys, but it seemed too gruesome, too real. I knew this thing was not a prank, but something terrible, diabolical, something otherworldly, horrendous. I continued crying and realized I was actually being pulled underneath the water. I felt myself losing my grip on the edge of the embankment, and I tried to grab some nettles. I managed to grab hold of them and felt the stings filling my hand. The creature grunted and groaned as it sensed my resistance. I tried to flap my other legs and kick, which I did with all my intensity and strength that I could possibly muster. After a few seconds of this attempt at a backlash, I finally broke free and bolted to climb out of the lake. I managed, looking down at my feet, and could see a good gash and blood seeping now into the white concrete. I looked back at the creature and could only see its eyes, which were now watching me from underwater. It seemed to be sinking back to the bottom. Its icy blue eyes grew faint and finally disappeared underneath the murk. I just shuddered and cried on the spot, not having known if I just relived a nightmare or what. I went straight to the camp leader's cabin and got my wound bandaged. I told him something grabbed me in the water and bit me. He wasn't sure what to believe, but asked me if perhaps I hit a rock as I jumped in. Listen, I know this sounds like it might be out of a movie, but I know what I saw is real. It has haunted me to this very day, and it's one of the reasons why I don't go swimming anymore. None of the other boys believed me when I got back either, and it really bugged me that they didn't even come looking for me after I had been gone for an hour. I'm writing about this experience in hopes you could possibly enlighten me and check if there have been anything similar in that London area. I have begun mental health counseling as recently because this creature has begun frequenting my dreams and nightmares. I wake up in cold sweats. Again, I have not been in any outdoor pool, lake, or beach in over 20 years, and I have to make up excuses, saying I'm just allergic to chlorine or even salt water. But really, it's because I feel this creature will want to finish what it failed to do 20 years ago. When I was just a little girl, every year on my birthday, my dad would take me to the local fun fair for a day out. This started when I was around 3 and continued right up until I was about 12. But on the occasion of my 6th birthday, I had a very disturbing experience. I'm 38 now and a waitress based out of Dallas, Texas. Or I used to be. Thanks to COVID, I'm now unemployed. Anyway, it's hard for me to write about this experience, so I'm getting my daughter to help me. I can still remember exactly what I wore on my 6th birthday. Little pink shorts, frilly socks up to my knees, and a red shirt with kittens on it. I felt like a princess, and my dad always had a way of making me feel like one on my birthday. The reason he spoiled me so much was because, well, I was an only child, and he worked a lot in real estate at the time. He was away from home a lot, but always made sure he had the day off for my birthday. The fun fair, as I like to call it, was always a huge spectacle, and it was always a great buzz of activity, especially during my birthday month, July. My 6th birthday was going to be the biggest day out ever, and my dad promised that my mom made us pack sandwiches before we headed off in his Range Rover. My dad had his 2 cars, but always made sure we used his Range Rover on my birthday. In later years, it was a Mercedes, but on my 6th birthday, it was still the same old Range Rover. The day was fun and filled with exciting rides and amusements. My dad seemed to enjoy them too, and he made sure to take lots of pictures. We even bumped into a guy from his work, and he had his daughter with him too, So myself and this other little girl, who I can't recall her name, but we went on a few rides together. The whole day was bliss, and I remember realizing I was so lucky to have a dad who enjoyed spending time with me. Some of these thoughts are hindsight, as it is hard to remember my exact emotions at 6, but I'm doing my best to create a sense of the scene and my emotions to this day. Dad and I stopped at a diner on our way home for a burger. He left me in the car, as he said he was in a rush. He seemed to be gone for ages, and I had not much to look out for, except for the vast expanse of desert and highway, which seemed to at the time extend for an eternity. So, I decided just to focus on the mechanic in front of me, who was pumping air into some tires. This man was probably in his mid-40s, with darker hair, and a sturdier frame. I could tell he knew what he was doing, and he even spotted me in the car and gave me a little wave. As I sat there, he disappeared into the garage, and my eyes focused on the drain pipes underneath the van he was working on. This is where I remember feeling a sense of terror as I watched something emerge from the pipes. Something slimy, with scales and fins. A creature that squeezed through the cracks in the drain pipe and moved around, leaving a trail of red slime, which resembled blood. Its teeth, too, had seemed to have some hair, which looked like spikes or hay as I studied it. It then went underneath the car, and I remember feeling sheer terror as I hoped my dad would come out and rescue me. I can only imagine that this creature was the terrors my family told me about under the bed, or at night. I closed my eyes and hoped that the creature would go away or disappear. But then I felt a tapping under my seat. It was faint at first, but grew louder. Then a grunting started, a guttural, horrible croak that sent shivers up my spine. Then I heard my name being called in a horrible, diabolical voice. It called twice, and that's when I spotted my father coming back to the car. The grunt stopped, and my dad got in, and was surprised to find me in tears. Naturally, he didn't believe what I had seen, and just kissed my forehead and told me it had been a long day. But 32 years later, I know what I saw. I believe that this creature was some kind of demon, and that's why I'm reaching out to you after spotting your channel, especially to see if there have been any similar sightings around the area. The whole experience for me as a kid was terrifying, and it affected me in many ways that I didn't understand. Now, I am highly protective of my daughters and don't want to give them going anywhere where they can encounter danger. I have a fear of water and cannot walk over a drain without feeling a sense of fear and panic. I hope you can help me get over this, and possibly get to the bottom of this. Oh, and before I go, I'm not sure if this has anything to really add to my story, but it's an interesting piece of information that I would later find out. I guess that entire area is a hotbed for satanic and occult ritual activity. Again, I don't know if that really adds to my story or gives it any other support or evidence, but it's just something interesting that's added on. I didn't learn this, of course, until later in life, once I befriended somebody very close who lived in that area for a long time and had other weird sightings and feelings. Nothing, of course, like what I saw, but seeing shadows moving out in the darkness, hearing noises, and feeling watched.